what you see in front of you is a big pitcher of mud. I remember when I turned 40, I decided to run a ultra marathon, and I looked at the winning times for this ultra marathon, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 16 minutes a mile. I'll toast these people, because I was at that time easily running 7 or 8 minutes a mile for long runs. And I was like, this is great. What I was shocked about when I got out there is that running that ultra marathon, I had to forage creeks that were up to my waist. I had to climb up mud hills that were extraordinarily difficult. I had to pull myself up by the roots of the things. It was just a horrible, horrible mess. And I didn't win that race. I came in second. The guy in front of me came in next to last. Okay, there's 2 people in the race. Back then, ultramarathons were not that popular. The thing is, what I have found is with work, a lot of teams feel like they're working through mud. I chose to run that ultramarathon on purpose. I knew it was going to be a muddy mess, and I had a lot of fun. But in work environments, it's not that fun. And people really need to learn that they don't have to do that, that they can actually change their fate. And what this talk is going to be is about I'm going to focus in on one team, although I've done this with many teams, of how they changed their fate, where they moved from the bad state to the good state. So this talk is called The 7 Essential Elements of Speed. It's based on my new book, Lead with Speed, which I'll talk about later. But here's the thing, the Money Through Mud project, where they were. Executives were furious at where this organization was. They would push and push and push for more speed. They were angry at the team because they were saying they were too slow. Meanwhile, the engineers were actually extremely frustrated, and they kept complaining about technical debt. What the managers heard, by the way, was whining. And what the engineers heard from management was, you're incompetent. This was a problem. And really, it was a mutual problem, because they actually had some features they actually could not develop at all because of the state of their system. The cost of quality was very high. Morale was very low. So this is why I call them the mud team. They were in rough shape. What they achieved. I'll come back to what they did. What they achieved, by the time they finished the effort I worked with them on, the team was over 10 times faster. I'll tell you how fast at the end. Features that could not be developed before actually took less than a week from the idea to successfully exiting test. 1 week with high quality. The company was actually then able to start a new product line based on the newly achieved speed, based on the new software system. Morale went sky high. What they did was the essence of this talk. It was executing on these 7 elements of speed, which is, in a big summary, setting a clear direction, knowing how fast you are, starting projects right, establishing a guidance system for speed to drive the project from start to finish, having clear expectations of excellence, following through, and best of all, finishing with style. So one of the big problems they really had was there was no clear direction on what they wanted the team to do. It doesn't matter if you're going fast if you don't know where you're going, and they did not know where they were going. They had to answer the question, faster to where. It actually took me a bit of work to get the executives and the engineering team to align on one clear thing. Their biggest problem was that they were #1 in their marketplace, but some new startups were passing them. They were able to get new features out at a pace much more rapidly than this team. They were innovating faster than this team was. They were getting features out to the marketplace faster than this team was. If this kept up, they weren't just going to lose their first place position. They were going to fade to the back of the pack. They had to change their fate. And after we got management aligned that they were yelling about the same thing, their technical debt actually was associated to their going slow, that they had a lot of other associated issues. they were able to align together and get working too. And so one of the first clear lessons I learned with them and a lot of others is you have to be really clear about where you're going. Segue for just a second. I went into one of the tier 1 automotive places, and I was at their research center. And they presented me with this list. They said, Alan, help us fix this list. They gave me a list of 12 things. And I went through the list of 12 things with them. I said, you know, half of these are whining and half of these are observations. You actually haven't told me what your problem is. After I worked through it with them, it came down to the same thing. They needed to innovate faster than their competitors. I was working with Jeff and Amy, and we were talking about the same thing. There was this big initiative, Speed to Fleet. And what was the real problem? They needed to innovate faster than the enemy. So setting a clear direction is critical. So what this team did, the MUD team with their executives, came up with a very clear direction, which is bottom line simple. We must innovate faster than our competitors. We must improve our development speed to drive innovation. They knew they were slow. They had to fix that. They knew, after a little bit of work with them, that they needed to empower their teams to drive the improvements. Managers had finally given up that pressure that they've been applying for 10 years didn't make the teams faster. They needed to give the teams the rein to figure out how to get faster, but they also had to push the teams to prove they could get faster. And to do that, the teams actually needed the ability to actually change their fate in into a modern development environment, because they were still working in, some of it was 1990s technology in 2010. So one of the very first things they had to do was to analyze their speed. And this is critical, because if you don't know where you are, how do you know you're going to get faster? If somebody's going out for a run and they don't measure their time or their distance, they don't know they're getting faster without that kind of measurement. The other thing is, trying harder doesn't make you faster. You must do something different. So we did some first order analysis with this team, which is, one thing is I drew this picture on the whiteboard, and I said, this is fast, this is slow, where are you now, and what's your trajectory? They drew this picture, that they were descending into darker and darker places, that the mud was getting deeper, it was getting more like quicksand. And what they had going on was, major problem was they had rampant spooky motion at a distance. What I mean by that is, they would change one part of the system over here, and something over here would break. They could not see a correlation without weeks of work on this. So for 2 weeks of development work of design and code, they need an actual 8 whole weeks before they allowed the software to escape to the customer. And then it was still likely to have 1 or 2 issues left, which were unacceptable to them and the customers. The cost of quality was sky high. It was well over 80%. And the problem was, in the center of the system, it was spaghetti code. If you know the McCabe complexity factor, if it's greater than 5, I think it is, it's untestable, and their McCabe complexity factor for that part of the system was over 100. This is not sufficient, by the way. You really should get a little bit better measure than this. And what we did was we actually measured the lines of code per hour for their bad part of the system. Now, they fought me hard in this, by the way. They're like, lines of code are like measuring the sawdust of a carpenter. It's not useful. I said it depends on your context. You can make it useful. What I drew for them is I drew them as S-curve. I said, I think what happened to you is, with any system, at the start, you need a bit of effort to get started, but then you can start to add value and value and value with very little effort. You can add more features, etc. That's what your competitors are doing right now. Where you are is at the top of the S-curve. It takes you a ton of effort to actually add any feature. And they said, actually, we're probably over on this curve, where we're starting to, it's taking even more effort and we're losing value to our customers because we can't deliver better features. We're starting to decrease in the value. So we actually measured, and they were at 1 line of code per hour in that part of the system. In the other part of the system, the part that was newer, well architected, well designed, well implemented, they were at 11 lines of code per hour. So even the people that didn't believe in lines of code per hour were flabbergasted, and they said, okay, we really got to fix this. So element 2, be able to measure how fast you're going, be able to figure out how fast you actually can go. So the prediction was very good, and management was now ready to invest in a major project to replace the core of the system and put something new into place to empower the team and give them the ability to do this. Now, to do this well, there's one thing they really have to do. It's a law. I used to play the game of Go. I still do occasionally. It's a game of strategy like chess, etc. And one of the people that I worked with, she really taught me this lesson. From a bad opening, you cannot win. I mean, from a good opening, you can lose. From a bad opening, you cannot win. And what she was saying is, if you look at any of the games by the masters in the games of strategy, the first 20% of the game, the first 20% of the moves, usually takes an hour to 2 hours, and the rest of the game takes an hour or less. So the opening is really important to get right. The core of how a project finishes is often found in the roots of how the project starts. Now, what's hard about this is I've done this exercise with multiple teams of executives. I sit them down in a room and I tell them to list me what are the 10 best practices for starting projects right. They almost always come up with at least 8 of the 10 elements that I think are important. Sometimes they come up with 11 or 12. And then I ask them to do a personal survey quickly on how many of those practices they do on a regular basis to start their projects. The answer was somewhere between 0 and 2 for most of the organizations I was in. Even though they know that they don't start the project right, they're in trouble the entire time. So in this organization, we chose to start it right. What we did is we rigged the start. And rigging the start is not that hard to, well, actually, the concepts are simple. It may be hard to do because there's a couple things that have to happen. One of the things that delighted me, they actually did hire me as a coach to help them do this. So I was able to hold their feet to the fire quite a bit. But one of the first things they did is they had to pick their best, most experienced project leader. And that is actually hard to do because that person was actually holding down the fort on all the big customer problems. They knew the system well, they knew how to handle the customers, but they realized this future work, the future of the company really depended on doing this project right. In the past, they usually gave the new project to somebody new because they didn't want to disturb their cash cow. They wanted to make sure that their cash cow was well taken care of. They made the choice to put the best project manager on it. The project leader then created a leadership team. Before we even hit the starting line, he was organizing the project to be successful. He asked for the best people he knew could work well with him. He was negotiated with management, get them. That team together defined what they meant by winning. And it wasn't just innovating faster than the enemy. They looked at what are the things they needed to get in place. Some of them were still working in ancient development environments. They realized they really need to get modern development environments in place. They need to get modern tools in place. They really wanted to embrace some of the new practices emerging. And then they negotiated to get the best people that knew the system well, the architects. And then they were ready to start. This was exciting, by the way. It was a really good choice for management to really push and get them to the starting line well. Then when they had their launch, what they did is they focused on the center of speed. One of the things we developed together was what I call the guidance system for speed. And what I have here is, in my opinion, and this team's opinion, and others I've worked with, is a focus of what is most important on the center going out to also important, but not as important as the previous circle. In the center is speed to value. And this is where you're really focused on making sure you have the most valuable product for the customer, the wow factor, but you also focus on the minimum part. You know, you've heard of minimal viable product, minimal valuable product. I like to call it minimum wow product because I've seen too many teams go to minimum boring product, and that really doesn't help their customers. You need to stay focused on the value to the customers and what's the fastest way to get there. The next thing out is, beside the mindset, get the right people, right skills. That's what they did. They got the right people, and when they're getting the modern development environment, they made sure they got trained in it, not just dropped it on their desk. They defined winning in ways that were motivating to the team and empowering to management as well. And they went through and prioritized all the features. The taking that, ripping out the center of that system, replace it with a new architecture was very scary. They knew they were going to lose a number of features that a lot of customers depended on, but they had to get the new set in place so they could go faster. So they had to do massive amount of prioritization, working with both product managers and customers and management to make sure they got the right small set in the middle for speed again. Then they organized the work in the team. So management was ready to put tons of people on this right at the start, but the team was wise and said, we need the small team first. And after we have it established, we can add lots of people because then we can enable a lot of parallel development. Right tools, right training. Again, get in the modern development environment, get people trained on it first.
Alan, I have a question.
Yes.
How long did that take? I mean, are we talking days, weeks, months?
The whole project?
No, the setting it up, you know.
Oh, thank you. To prepare to get to the starting line for this project took about 2 months, which is actually pretty fast if you want to look at it this way, because what they had to do is they actually had to essentially shut down new development on their existing product line. And no, by the way, this project was going to take about 2 years. They had to actually replace about 500,000 lines of code with a whole new architecture in the center, and it was going to be a lot smaller. They estimated it was going to be about 250,000 lines of code instead, but they had to take their best people to put them on this project and essentially stop the other project development. Does that make sense, Julia?
Yeah, and it was useful to know how long that was in relation to the overall project.
Yes. So getting to the starting line did take a lot of effort, and they did work on it fast once they realized the business case for this. The next immutable law is you get the results you're expecting. I'm sure many of you have heard me talk about this before, but this is what I call setting expectations of excellence. Let's look at the negative case first. I used to work in an organization many moon ago when I was in my young 20s, where his mantra, the executive said over and over, hurry up and get it to test. The faster we get it there, the more defects, the sooner we'll find them. And those expectations were fully fulfilled every time. He was able to push and prod the teams. He made sure they weren't doing unit testing. He made sure they weren't doing any types of reviews. Just get it to testing. That organization actually built a cathedral to worship defects. They actually built a whole new building to put in basically $250,000 machines. So they had 100 of those $250,000 machines in a new building where they staffed it with testers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as well as bringing in 20 software engineers with bachelor's or master's whose sole job was to debug the problems and take it back to the people that were creating them. Extraordinarily high cost of quality. You get the results you expect. If you flip it over, you can really set strong expectations of what really can be accomplished and do it much better. And that's understanding the laws. So here's what I always do with a lot of organizations. This is what I call expectations of excellence. I've also called it obligations of engineers. This is what I really believe is true across almost every organization I've worked with. I can't think of an exception at the moment. Number one is always focusing on high value to the customer. Absolutely, the teams need to do that. Number two is high quality is critical. The customers depend on it. And when you ask executives about quality, they always say, quality is not as important as speed. But then I say, is it okay for the customer to have a broken product? And they say, no, it's not okay for the customer to find any important defects. Minor ones might be okay, but no important ones. Quality is critical. Quality is also critical to speed. As we've talked about many times, the cost of quality is a law of gravity. The higher the cost of quality, the slower your development. The lower your cost of quality, the more time you have for coding, design, and delivering value. Quality is critical. Number three expectation I have for every team, and we did it with this team, is to turn over every rock, every opportunity for speed improvements. And you do that before you look at how do you make a commitment you can keep. And what I mean by this is the team actually did look at multiple ways. They said, can we bring in external experts that can help us more? And they actually did figure out that they could use experts, and they asked for 3 different experts from organizations. Management said yes, because it was going to help their speed. Ask for the right tools. If you think that buying a F-18 fighter jet will help you go faster and you can justify it, it might be a worthy investment. Now, I can't think of anything that would be worthwhile on, but you should ask. If you have something important, you should ask for it. And the team should be aligned on looking at those opportunities all the time. Number 4 is where we come in a lot, is making commitments we can keep. Once you've turned over your rock, you got to make a commitment you can keep. You're on the fastest path. You also have to be realistic. You got to account for growth in requirements, because that'll always happen. You have to account for misestimates. You have to account for risks. You have to account for vacations, sick days, and now apparently pandemics. So we got to plan for success and plan for the things that will go wrong. And the 5th element I add here all the time is ensure you have useful and used data to drive the project. We really should know what our earned value is, what our planned value is, what our earned value is, our baseline. You should actually be able to know how many defects you're predicting are going to go into test and how to deal with them.
Alan, this is Brad. I got a question on that.
Hi, Brad.
What is used data?
Used data? That they actually look at it and make decisions based on it. Have you ever seen any projects collecting data and never used it?
In the past, yep.
Yep. So here's where I'm saying this is what leadership needs to do. I'm going to talk about follow through next, but follow through is making sure you have the data and make sure it's being used. One of the organization's projects that I was involved with lately, and I'm going to tell you why it was lately, because I looked through their data and I said essentially that they were a year behind schedule based on their data. Nobody argued with me after, well, they did argue me, but after they went through it, they believed me. And then they decided they had to ignore that and live in denial, and they didn't want to work with me anymore. And the project finished a year and a half late instead of a year late. I was wrong. Did I answer your question, Brad?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next element that was really important was follow through. Because as they say in Game of Thrones, words are just wind. Your actions make your expectations much clearer than your words. And what I mean by this is you can say all those things about quality is job one. You can say that we're going to empower you to make the right decisions. But if the only question you ever asked as an executive is, when are you going to be finished? What is your schedule? Did you complete this yet? If the only thing you're ever talking about is schedule, you're getting across only one message. Get it out there as soon as possible so we can start finding the defects. Don't do that. Make your actions clear. As a leader, you must be prepared to follow through. And here's situations that I've been working with people on since the year 2000, I believe, when I worked at the SCI. I was just doing it this last week, by the way. One of my exceptional engineers called me and said, Alan, my people are not bringing my data to me when I need it. I want a data update every Tuesday at 11 o'clock, Thursday at 11 o'clock. And I said, what do you do when they don't bring it to you? What do you mean? What do you do? You have to be ready to follow through. You have to be ready to reinforce your expectations. So what I worked with this individual was, number one, talk to the people that are not doing it and let them know you're serious and let them know what you're going to do if they don't have it in there in time. And we went through a rheostat of possibilities. One is, classically cancel the meeting and have the meeting again an hour later and let them know they held everybody else up. Get them to get the data into the system right then, right there. Another one is they have to throw $5 in the pot or something significant for a party later, or write a poem, or whatever to make it clear that the expectation is there and you follow through on it. If team members aren't following process, the first time you see that, call them on it and either fix the process because they're right, it's wrong, or get them to follow the process and train them on how to do so. You have to be ready for the first instance of every one of these. And that's what I worked with on this team, which made an extraordinary difference. They did this perfectly except for one instance. One person was one of the lead architects, and that person was doing some gold plating and not getting out of the sandbox. And the team leader let it go too long, and it cost him a month of schedule. He still finished on time because he was able to get everybody aligned, but he realized that he learned from that, by the way, which makes it not a tragedy, but a success. He learned that you really have to deal with the problems when they occur and be ready to follow through. Be prepared to act. So I love this picture. When I was in high school, way back when I was around 16, my cross-country coach was looking perplexed because what he was seeing was me running by myself, flinging myself like this guy toward an invisible finish line. And then I'd get back up and I'd turn around and I'd shake an invisible person's hand. He said, "What the heck are you doing?" Do you know what I was doing, guys? I was practicing winning with style. And that works. And this is really important for projects, especially projects that are going to be so different than the rest of the organization. This project did finish with style because actually, I didn't tell you this number at the start. I said it was greater than 10 lines of code per hour. It's flabbergasting what they're at now. They're actually at 22 lines of code per hour. Think about that. From 1 line of code per hour to 22 lines of code per hour. Same language, same domain, many of the same people. It's just, they really changed the game. Their cost of quality is now under 20% from over 80%. They made a great system. They finished on time. And what they needed to do, though, to finish on time was a lot of detailed work because finishing projects well is a game of details. And again, the leaders had to be prepared for this. They had to look ahead and say, what do we need to do to finish? What do we need to do to make sure that everybody comes in on time? What do we need to do to let management know that even though we look easy, this was hard? Have you ever watched somebody finish a marathon that looks completely at ease, like the winner, and somebody back in the pack look like they're dying? It's all about preparation, folks. If you're well prepared for the marathon, you're going to look good at the end. If you're not prepared, you're not going to look good at the end. We've seen many projects struggling through the finish line, and some projects look great. They need to show why they look great. Finish with style. So I do have a couple more notes to say, but I want to open it up to questions, comments, etc. Really, this one team was an extraordinary experience. We have seen this happen many times, and I want to say one of the big lessons I had for this was immutable law number one. I mentioned immutable laws. I have 21 immutable laws in my book. And the first immutable law, number one, is you own the accelerator for the speed of your work and the work of those that you lead. And what we really worked on there was to get everybody to own the accelerator, from management, executives, team leader, down to individual engineers, to always be looking at how can we make this project as fast to the speed to value as possible. Okay, questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question, Alan. Daryl here.
Yes, sir.
So in starting right, one of the big things you emphasized was having the right people available and on the team. And you talked about the organization putting its best leader on there and the leader being able to select a leadership team.
Yes.
Which is great. You know, you have a first project, you want it to look good, you want things to go right. What do you do though next time and for the other projects as you try to expand this across an organization? Not everyone can have the best people in the organization, right? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
2 points. Three points. Number one is in the chapter I'm really clear about this is you evaluate the importance of the project. They can't all be number one. In this case, it was clearly the number one thing for their future. They had to do this. So you always have to be realistic about adjusting expectations based on the priority of the project. That makes sense?
Sure.
Yep.
Number two is, I talk about this in other parts of the book. It's really about how do you accelerate the rest of your leadership? And I have a lot of comments on that, but in big summary is one of the things you want to do is start getting your leaders to understand how to make those around them better, how to actually work with the junior project managers, the people that are not there yet, to help them come up to speed faster. You want to amplify their effectiveness through others. And I talk about how to start to create a community of mastery around this excellence. Point three is read the book. That was a shameless plug. Sorry about that. Daryl, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I would think also, Alan, that you know, the people that are on that successful project become really good candidates to be the next good team leaders and stuff and project managers because they've lived it. They understand how to do it from an experiential perspective.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Other questions or comments?
Hi, Alan. This is Bill. An observation. If we go back to our old PSP data, we found that the experience was slightly anti-correlated with how fast they could program with speed. You don't think that might be the best programmers getting promoted out, do you?
Oh, wait. When I say putting the most experienced person on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had Julia review this, and she picked on one of my words. What I really hope to work with management on is that they are focused on people that can lead, not just people who can code. So yes, you do not want to get your best coders out of there. You want to get your best leaders leading. I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure if I got it right.
Oh, partly, yeah. I'm just suspicious that that part of that might actually be the most capable programmers were the ones getting promoted.
No, in this case, not. Like in the case study I just presented here, this guy admits that he's not a great coder, but he really is a very good leader. And that's really what I'm working with. When I'm doing the exceptional engineer program, I'm really hoping to not create more managers. I'm hoping to get engineers that can actually make those around them better, including the leaders above them. That's a longer topic, Bill. We'll tackle that one another time.
Okay, well, let me try another variation, and this is a theme I've been working on. I've come across a lot of references to the force multiplier. They stopped pushing back against the times 10 programmer and just changed the subject to the force multiplier programmer, the guy who makes everything else faster.
Yes, I'm working on that too. Yes.
Yeah, and I think what you're suggesting is that what I would tell people is that you're using the wrong kind of thinking. Your force multiplier isn't going to be finding that unicorn programmer. It's going to be finding the right management and leading.
It's the right management and leading. And what I'm pushing on too is I find that this is what a talk I did at our summit, which is that on most of the great teams, there's somebody in the center of that, an engineer, that's also a peer that's leading others. So I agree with you on the leadership thing, but I also believe peers can lead other peers with the right kind of attitude and a little bit of training on how to make your peers stand up to your expectations.
Alan, so that's a good segue into another question that I have. The way you describe this is very familiar to a lot of us with the TSP background. In the Agile world, though, contrary to how you talk about finding a good leader, and that leader puts together the leadership team, and then the leadership sets the expectations for the team. In the Agile world, we talk about self-organized teams.
Yes.
And so, I can see a lot of people from the Agile world saying, this isn't Agile, this isn't the way Agile teams work. So what would be your comments on self-managed, self-organizing, and applying this to that kind of culture or environment?
It gets into the details. I'll just say this. Most of the organizations I work with now are quote unquote Agile organizations. Again, Agile is a manifestable, not a methodology. When we get into the details of what they're doing, it's kind of weird sometimes. They're doing part of Scrum, or part of this, or part of that. So what it comes down to is I help them organize, and if you like, self-organize. But it is, any organization needs leadership. And even self-organized teams need leadership. And I hope it's self-leadership, but there's parts, wow, I'm about to go into way complicated. But let me just say this. One of the teams I worked with was a extreme programming team. And what it turned out, after I was done working with them, they told me that it turned out they were an aspirational extreme programming team. They actually weren't doing any of the 8 practices. By the time we were done working together, they said, we're finally actually doing this. You should call your process the extreme team process. And I'm like, you can call it anything you want, just do good work. Longer discussion later, Daryl. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, this is Prasad from HP.
Okay, that gentleman first, then Brad second.
Hey, Pradeep or PP?
Go ahead, Prasad.
Prasad.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Alan. Great presentation. One quick question. Having a productivity as a measure of progress or speed, does that drive a wrong kind of behavior in the team?
Absolutely, it could. By the way, I find it dangerous that I put this in the presentation because of that. Maybe I'll remove that. The important thing is to use it the right way. This team was really worried about using a productivity measure like that. But we actually used 3 measures to put it into balance. So I want to be clear about that. One measure was this, just let's look at the lines of code per hour to see what we are order of magnitude difference. The order of magnitude difference was extreme. we looked at the cost of quality, and we saw that the cost of quality was over 80%. That was irrefutable. The other thing we looked at is how long does it take to get a feature done? And we found that there was some features that took months or not at all in the old system, and in the new system, you could get it done in a week. That was our 3 measures. So you got to keep it in context always. Did I answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Brad.
So Alan, when can I buy the T-shirt?
Aha! That's my next slide. So I think we should wrap up questions. Julia, you're our illustrious facilitator. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fine.
Okay.
And feel free to text Alan separately, if you have any, or email him if you have any questions.
Yeah, as you can tell, I love to talk. So feel free to call me, email me, text me, Facebook me. No tweets though. Okay. Hey, I have some free offers for you guys. You can get books. You get T-shirts. This is a great T-shirt, by the way. My peers say I'm insane because I'm paying for 100% cotton, silk printing, really comfortable. And by the way, I'm going to be generous. It cost me like $20 or $30 to ship to Mexico or overseas, but whoever's on this phone call, you can get a T-shirt by doing these simple things. Buy the book and advertise it on social media, and I'll send you a T-shirt. Just go to my website, you see the details. And I'm also going to do another webinar on the mindset of speed, which is a very different perspective than I gave here. This was technical. The other one's going to be about really how do you have to think about this to own the accelerator. So buy some books, promote it on social media, you can get a T-shirt. I like the T-shirt, by the way. Fernando,
Brad,
you need one.
yeah,
Brad,
by the way, this is Jeff. We're buying some T-shirt or some books, so we'll get some T-shirts.
Oh yeah, you're by 50. Jeff's the first winner for 50.
Right.
So my final thought is, my final law of speed is leading with joy from start to finish infuses those following you with the joy of speed. So really, I really try to do this in my work, and I try to inspire others. Have fun doing this, folks. It's a great world out there. Lead with joy, do good in the world. Thank you very much.